Snow drifted across the Wyoming plains like torn lace, the wind tugging at the earth as though it wanted to peel the world bare. Levi Callahan sat by the fire in his cabin, the orange glow painting long shadows across timber walls scarred with years of storms. His pipe smoldered in his hand, untouched, as he stared into the flames that had long become his only companion. The silence of winter pressed heavy against the glass panes, and though he had grown used to that silence since burying his wife 3 years ago, tonight it felt like a weight he could not lift. He had not expected the knock. It came soft at first, then urgent, carried through the storm. He thought for a moment the wind itself had grown impatient, rattling the wood. But when it came again, sharp and deliberate, he rose from his chair with a heaviness in his limbs. Pulling the door open, he was met with a figure swaying in the snow's white blindness. A young woman, wrapped in a thin shawl, hair dark and heavy with ice, stood before him. In her arms clung 2 small girls, their cheeks pale with hunger. Her lips trembled, yet her voice did not falter. "My children have not eaten in 2 days," she said, each word like a stone dropped into a well. Behind her, the storm howled, but in her eyes, black, steady, yet trembling with unshed tears, Levi saw a silence deeper than any winter. She was Ayoka, though he did not know her name yet. And she was alone in a way that reached him more sharply than the cold at his throat. He stared too long. His hand gripped the doorframe, torn between suspicion born of townsfolk whispers and something older, something softer that stirred despite him. The woman shifted under his gaze, pride stiffening her spine, as if daring him to close the door and end her plea with one gesture. But the girls pressed their faces into her skirts, their ribs faint outlines beneath threadbare cloth. Levi's chest tightened until he could scarcely breathe. "Come inside," he muttered at last. The words sounded like they belonged to another man, one braver than he. Yet he stepped back and opened the door wider. She entered without thanks, not out of rudeness but because gratitude seemed too costly in that moment. The little girl stumbled toward the hearth, drawn by its glow, and collapsed onto the rug. Levi set bread and milk upon the table, and they fell upon it as if it might vanish. Ayoka stood apart, hands folded, watching. She did not eat. Her gaze flickered to Levi, suspicious, as though she expected the kindness to sour, to be snatched back. He watched the way she held herself, tall despite exhaustion, shoulders braced against invisible blows. Her skin was browned by wind and sun, her eyes shadowed by grief. She was younger than he expected, no more than 24, but the years carved into her face told of losses deeper than her age should carry. The children's soft chewing filled the silence. Levi cleared his throat. "Where's your home?" "Gone," she answered, the word heavy as stone. Her husband had died the past spring, she explained slowly, voice flat with practiced telling. Illness had carried him swift, and with him, their standing among her people. The white townsfolk had never offered welcome. Widowed, she had even less. No kin nearby, no land, no food left. Winter had bared its teeth, and she had walked until her strength failed, driven by the thought of 2 small mouths. Levi listened, a knot forming in his stomach. He had known loss himself, though in another shape. His wife, Clara, taken by fever, had left him to a silence that filled every room of this cabin. He knew the weight of burying love, of standing among neighbors who muttered pity with eyes that looked elsewhere. Yet here before him was a woman whose grief was doubled by hunger, by exile, by the sharp edge of disdain that the valley spat upon her. The fire cracked. The storm rattled the shutters. For a long while Levi said nothing. His mind filled with the voices of town, the whispered warnings, the muttered slurs, the judgment that had long made him keep to himself. He imagined what they would say if they saw her here, her children eating at his table. His name would sour in their mouths like spoiled milk. But then the younger girl, Waya, lifted her head from the bread, eyes wide and shining, and whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was small, but it cracked something open in him. "You'll stay the night," he said quietly. "Storm's too thick to walk." Ayoka bowed her head slightly, not quite nodding, not quite yielding. She pulled her daughters close to her side and settled them near the hearth. Levi returned to his chair, but the room no longer felt hollow. Instead, it carried a new, uneasy pulse. He wondered if he had invited trouble into his home or salvation. Morning came pale and cruel. Snow lay high against the door, the valley blanketed in silence. The girls slept bundled together, their faces flushed with warmth for the first time in many days. Ayoka had not slept. She sat upright, eyes trained on the flames as if watching them to be sure they did not fade. Levi stepped quietly, reluctant to break the fragile peace. Yet when her gaze met his, he felt pinned again, measured, weighed. "You should eat," he said, offering what remained of the bread. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It is enough that my children have food." Levi set the bread on the table anyway and turned away. Pride, he thought. He knew it well. It had kept him alive when grief hollowed him, had kept him upright when neighbors pitted too loudly. Yet he wondered, was pride not another hunger, just one the body could not see? In the days that followed, the storm lingered. Travel was impossible and necessity bound them under the same roof. Ayoka tended the fire, patched Levi's worn shirts with steady hands, and coaxed the horses calm when the wind howled too fiercely through the barn. Her daughters laughed at small things, a crackling log, a scrap of yarn, bringing life back to corners of the cabin long silent. Levi found himself watching, silently, ashamed at how much warmth their presence stirred in him. But the valley had long ears. When at last he rode into town for supplies, voices followed him. "Callahan's keeping an Indian woman at his place," someone muttered near the store. "Widow too. God help him." Levi's jaw tightened. He remembered the pitying eyes that once followed him, and now imagined scorn in their place. The world had little forgiveness for those who stepped outside its lines. When he returned home, Ayoka sensed the shift in his shoulders. She asked nothing, but her eyes caught his as if to say she knew already. That night, when the girls slept, she spoke softly by the fire. "They will not forgive you for helping me." "I don't need their forgiveness," Levi said, but the words tasted thin. "You will pay a price." Levi looked at her then, the flicker of the flames carving light into her face. She was not asking for pity, she was telling him a truth she had lived all her life. And yet, though her words carried warning, her eyes carried something else, a flicker of trust, reluctant but growing. It left him restless, as though the storm outside had taken root within him. Days turned to weeks. The snow began to melt into rivulets, but the memory of hunger and cold lingered in the air. Levi felt his house shift from hollow place to something tender, unspoken. He never asked Ayoka to stay, yet neither did he ask her to leave. And in the quiet, as he watched her cradle her daughters close, as he saw the dignity that survived even scorn and winter, he wondered if perhaps he had opened not only his door that night, but his life. The thaw came slow. But in that slowness something else was taking root. And though neither spoke of it, both knew, the winter that had nearly undone them had also bound them, thread by fragile thread, into something that might endure beyond the snow. And yet, Levi could not shake the thought, storms pass but storms return. What would happen when the next one came knocking?